Welcome, hello and hi my creative friends. Today we're checking out an upgrade to a classic pencil. From the sunny shores of Britain comes a pencil range that combines the best of two other ranges, giving artists long-lasting precision and a smooth laydown. With a reputation for strong, vibrant, clean colours and apparently excellent graduations, I give you the Derwent Procolour. The Derwent Procolour is almost the forgotten Derwent. When you think Derwent, chances are this isn't the Derwent you're thinking about. And that's a bit of a shame because while you never really hear about it, it is a very interesting pencil. Derwent has apparently taken two ranges, the aging classic artist range and the newer, much softer Colorsoft range, and combined them together to produce a third kit, the Procolour. The way they describe it sort of sounds like they've taken pencils from each kit and jammed them all together into one big kit, which to be fair is pretty unlikely. But the idea that they have taken the very best aspects of both ranges and made a third range is quite intriguing. We haven't played with the Colorsoft yet, it's on the cards, but we have looked extensively at the artist range. I wasn't super impressed by them as they're an older pencil that struggles a bit due to the older technology, but they are one of those pencils that has a lot of love behind them, primarily because people that use them know them really well. So hopefully the lovers of both pencils will love the Procolour. Today, we're doing what we always do and throwing a series of tests at these pencils to answer that burning question, are they any good? First up, let's check out the design of the Derwent Procolour pencils. This is the Derwent Procolour tin of 36 coloured pencils. If we check out the side, it comes in singular tins of 12, 24, 36, 72 and boxes of 48 and 72. So a medium range of colours available in the Procolour range. Like most of Derwent's professional range, they are also available open stock, so individually as well. If we come back to our 36 pack, we can see the design is iconically Derwent with a bright red Derwent logo on a blue tin. The graphics really aren't quite as impressive as some other Derwent ranges, but it is bright and poppy. I also do always love the little British flag on the front of the Derwent's packaging. Like the rest of the Derwent ranges, there's a very small swatch on the front and a clear indication of how many pencils we have. If we turn the tin over, the first thing you'll notice is the plastic. Derwent does an interesting thing where they shrink wrap the pencils to the rear of the tin, which helps keep them together in shipping. It's a nice little touch to make sure your pencils arrive in one piece. If I cut it off, and let's check out that rear. Here we have further information about the pencils in multiple languages and information that the pigment is a perfect combination of strong point and smooth laydown. Let's check that out later. If we open it up and take the rest of our plastic off, we can finally see the pencils. I have to say these pencils are not what I was expecting. For a name like Procolour, I was expecting vibrancy. Instead, they are all really matte charcoal, almost indigo barrels. They also look rough on the tips. The tray is quite deep and I don't think you would have any issues storing your pencils in here. Let's go take a close-up look at the pencils themselves. This is the Derwent Procolour pencil. It's a charcoal satin textured pencil and it's quite elegant. Texturally, I can confirm it's not strangely grippy like the artist pencils were. It does feel much more sleek and elegant like the Lightfast did. The Procolour is a round-barreled, slightly thicker than usual pencil coming in at 8mm. Lengthwise, it comes in just short of 180mm, being around 178mm. The core of the Procolour is a very vibrant 4mm wax core. Like other Derwent ranges, the wood on the tip comes rough from factory. That wood is apparently Californian incense cedar wood, although that info is a bit hard to find, so don't quote me on that. From that rough tip downwards, we have Made in Britain in crisp silver font, followed by Derwent Procolour, the pigment name and number. Capping it all is that famous muted silver swoosh or ring, and the pencil's tip is dipped in its colour. The pencil's end is rounded. Derwent's design is always an interesting thing. You either love what they do or you really just don't. I wasn't super sold when we checked out the artist range, but I did really like the Lightfast. There's only small differences between the two, but those differences elevate the Lightfast into something very special. The Procolour are very similar to that. While they're not exactly what I expected with a name like Procolour, I thought they'd be very bright and poppy, but for what they are, it's really grown on me as I've tested them. This rich charcoal satiny feel that the Procolour has Feels like a very elegant workhorse pencil. I'm still not sold on what Derwent does with the raw wood tips of these ranges. I think it's supposed to look natural, but it always looks a bit unfinished to me. I'd also love Derwent to have a slightly more silvery silver swoosh on the end and a fractionally larger swatch, but those are just personal preferences. Package-wise, it's very much in line with what Derwent does for branding. It's not as striking as the Lightfast, and possibly they could do something that makes this range stand out a little bit more, as it does feel a little bit like the forgotten Derwent. So, let's start testing these pencils. First up, let's check the saturation and vibrancy. Our first test today is the saturation and vibrancy test. In this test, we look at how bright and how saturated we can make these pencils and how consistent they are across various weights. Today with this test, because I had at least 2 people ask me to, and because I really just enjoy it, we're going to do what we did last episode with our Arteza and swatch our 36 kit here. Derwent always has such interesting color ranges, so let's have a look at it. An interesting colour range is always a way to describe Derwent's choice as to what they put into a pencil kit. Initially, when you look at the pencils they provide, it always tends to feel that there are a lot of greens and browns more than anything else in there. That's also one of the things Derwent lovers love. But if you're coming from a more vibrant pencil brand, it can be quite a shock. I have to say though, there is a lot more colours coming down here than I thought. The yellows are much yellower than expected, and those reds and pinks are far more vibrant than I thought they would be. As I'm well into laying down my colours, while the saturation and vibrancy is really lovely, I am having to press really very hard to get there. I'm not finding the Procolour scratchy per se, but they feel, I guess the word is dry as I use them. They don't really seem to glide. I'm also trying to do these numerically, because while Derwent has a small swatch on their tin, there is no naming of the pencils there, so I just had to assume the numbers would be pretty matchy-matchy. It doesn't look like they are, unfortunately. There are some nice runs of colours, but random colours jump out as not fitting where they are. As I'm getting closer to the end with these, it's even a bit more all over the place with the colours. Still, an interesting range in this 36 kit. Well, that was really fun, and to be fair, looking at all the colours this swatch has in it, it's a little bit surprising. There's a lot more poppy, vibrant colours than I initially thought there would be when looking at this 36 pencil kit's pencils. When you look at these pencils and the front swatch, this kit does look like it lacks reds and blues, with there being a lot of greens and browns. But seeing them swatched, there is really a lot of variation here, with an equal distribution of poppy colours and then very subtle colours like our Salmon 17 and the Distant Green 43, which is great to see. It is a little bit annoying that a company like Derwent, with a range that's been developed completely from the ground up, doesn't really have an order in their pencil numbering system. It would really make this swatching a little bit more pleasant and easier to work with these colours. The swatch on the tin doesn't offer much help, and while I could grab a swatch that organises the colour in order from their site, I don't really see why it isn't just 1 to 72, white to black. Anyway, other than that, initial thoughts are that I'm finding these pencils quite comfortable to use. Okay, on to our second part of this test. Let's break out our scale and check out the second part of our saturation and vibrancy test. What I'm doing here is what we normally do. I'm picking 4 colours from this kit plus our dominant black and white, and we're going to measure these across various weights. The way we're going to be doing this is by putting down pigment from the pencils at 5 different pressures: 25 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, 200 grams, and 400 grams. So light to heavy. As the pressure builds up, hopefully the pencil should become more and more saturated, which will show us just how consistent and predictable this saturation is. For any paper people out there, I'm just using basic 120 GSM white multimedia paper for these tests. Let's get started. The 6 Procolour pencils I've chosen for this today are red, primary red 12, green, grass green 49, blue, spectrum blue 34, yellow, buttercup yellow 03, white, Chinese white 72, and ivory black 71. Starting as we always do with our red at 25 grams. This test, you may notice the number on the scale is a bit flashy. I'm up the shutter speed in filming this. Those of you who know cameras know what I did wrong. Those who don't, sorry, it's just a bit flashy this test. The red has gone down very lightly, but also very consistently for a wax-based pencil. The green is almost a mirror image of that, but even lighter than the red. The blue, like quite often is the case, is very similar in density to the red. And that yellow is very light, much lighter than the rest. The black, it's very dense for 25 grams. On to our 50. Immediately that red is a doubling from the 25 grams. The green is substantially improved from the 25 grams, very similar to the red. The blue is following suit, a very nice increase. The yellow, like the green, has jumped in saturation, and that black, again the densest. 100 grams, often where wax pencils start shining. Let's roll through this 100 grams even quicker, as that red, green, blue, yellow, and black are extremely consistent in their saturation put down. Very much each one a doubling from the 50 grams. The 200 grams. The red is going down very nicely. It's almost burnishing the page here. The green feels like it's more than a doubling here. The blue is definitely more than doubled the 100 grams. The yellow is much more consistent doubling that 100 grams. And the black, very much like the red, has consistently doubled. Onto our 400 grams, the highest weight. Ooh, that red has really come down very densely. We have really burnished the paper here, but it does feel like it's much more than a doubling in saturation. That green is very much exactly the same as the red. So too is that blue as it's going down. The yellow is very close to the other colors and becoming a super yellow. And our black, it's pretty consistent with our other colors, but in this 400 gram weight, looks a bit grayer than what I'd call true black. Let's check out our white. That 25 grams is going down quite heavy for a 25 gram weight. Our 50 grams, I'd say, has very much doubled the 25 gram weight. Our 100 grams is increased, but not to what I'd consider a doubling from the 50 grams. The 200 grams is a doubling from the 100 grams, but that 400, it's a bit denser, but pretty close to the 200 gram mark. For a pencil range called Procolour, they certainly put down a lot of color. The swatching here was really interesting, seeing how much color was in this kit overall, but when you see it ramp up here on the scale test, it's actually pretty surprising. These pencils are wax-based pencils, but at the lighter weights at least, they really do feel like oil-based pencils. They have that real light end that oil does so well and wax often struggles with. Then surprisingly, once we build up the pressure around the 200 gram mark, they completely flip and start feeling exactly like wax pencils. Most of that 400 gram mark was burnishing the page, which is very much traditionally easier with wax. Consistency wise, they were pretty decent across the board, although hitting that 200 gram mark is much more than I'd consider a doubling from the 100 gram mark. It was also tricky to get a really high pressure and stay there. It did feel like they were much more comfortable at the 100 to 200 grams. However, the saturation was so poppy at that 400 grams, I feel like it's worth the work. They're also quite nice to use, unlike the Artist series from Derwent, which I felt were uncomfortable and scratchy on the page. These are much lighter and smoother to use, although they still feel like quite a hard pencil. Interestingly, I also didn't really use very much of the pencil in doing these tests. Sometimes when I'm testing pencils, they just get chewed through so quickly in this first test, and it makes it so tough to do the next tests. A tezzer. Not so here. The Procolour really seemed to have a bit of longevity, which is great. The white did okay. It wasn't very consistent in its doubling and didn't really hit the same intensity as our other colours, but it did okay. Time to give our Procolour a score here. To do this, we're using our scale of A to F, with S sitting above it all being superb. Today for the Derwent Procolour, I'm going to give them an A for the saturation and vibrancy test. A really good start for the Procolour, only dropping from an A+ because of that white. Our next test is of course the single pencil gradient test, where we check out how well our 6 test pencils gradient. This is a pretty stock standard test for any pencil, and that's because it tells us a lot about the characteristics of that pencil, and importantly, how much control we have over it. Derwent claims on their site that, and I quote, "There is no dusting, chipping, or smudging of the product, and you can achieve excellent graduation from very light to strong." So let's see if they're right about the gradienting. Weirdly, I've put my scale here on kilograms, not grams, so your daily maths lesson is times it by 1000 and you have grams. Or just ignore the dot and it's the same. Maths! Anyway, we're starting with our red, and this is very interesting. I'm actually struggling a bit to do this dense color. It's very much jumping around the 400 and 300 gram mark. But as I go down and hit that 200 gram, look at that, the color just drops right off. This is actually one of those times I'm glad I'm doing it on the scales, as I can go back and check that I'm not muffing this. Our green now, as I go through our 400 grams into the 300, it's pretty similar, but when I start hitting the 200 grams, it really does just drop straight off. Like our red, we drop into our lighter weight, and from about the 200 to the 50, it's pretty much the same density. Onto our blue. Dense color, which is a very nice blue, then bang, it slides off that color ledge again. The blue has an even steeper ledge than the green and red. Now our yellow. The yellow is actually a much better gradient than our previous colors. While they're sliding into our lighter and quickly, it's nowhere near as bad as the others. Our black. It's going down probably the worst of the lot. It's dense enough at the high end, but drops through the light end very quickly, which for some reason I'm really struggling here, and it just doesn't want to go lighter. Let's check out that white. I never really do the white on the scale, but looking at the color results, maybe I should. It's going down very densely, though there are a lot of crumbs, which I'm thinking Derwent calls dusting. Strangely, it doesn't really seem to have that ledge that the colors have. It's gone down much better than the colors. Well, that was such an interesting test. I'm glad I had the scale to look at when I did this, else I'd have thought I was just doing them really badly. The Procolour has a massive drop off in density from about 250 grams downwards. Then, when it gets to that point, it stays very similar through the weight till the light end. That ledge is there on all the pencils tested here, excluding the white, so I'm assuming it's intentional. The artist pencils are quite scratchy and the Colorsoft quite soft, so maybe the wizards at Derwent, in combining these, have just built a pencil that does this on purpose? I'm not sure, but maybe that's what Derwent means by excellent graduation. Anyway, for our purposes, it's not great. If you wanted any mid-range or any subtlety in your gradients with these, you'd really have to work on it. The white was surprisingly okay in this test. It's gradiented well and shown a nice heavy end with a subtle light end. For the Procolour, for a test that was really quite hard to do, I'm going to give them a C in the gradient test. With a good white and everything else not so good, that puts them here. Blending. I say the same thing every time, and you know what? I'm gonna say it again. Blending is one of the most important things we can do with a good pencil. A good blend takes our art from the average to the extraordinary. For this test, I'm taking our 4 primary colors, a red to green, blue to yellow, and we're going to, you guessed it, blend them. Okay, these pencils have fairly unusual characteristics about them, so I'm not 100% sure our standard blending test here will really show us how well they blend. So I'm gonna try and hold that heavier end a bit longer as I bring these down just to make sure we get a good look. Our red is coming down and it's not bad. Holding the heavier weight makes it look a little bit more like a normal gradient. Up with our green, that's a very dense green at the high end. As we start to cross over, okay, that's pretty decent. As soon as we hit the red, there's a brown coming through straight away. The pigment also felt really smooth as I'm crossing over our second color, which is great. Onto our blue. I think I held that heavy weight a little bit longer than I want to, but it's burnished the paper so heavily, it's like a solid block. Up with our yellow. This is even easier to see as that yellow hits the blue right from the start. We're getting a very poppy green coming through, almost from the very first blending to the last, which is great to see. Well, there you go. I'm glad I made these gradients a little denser and held that heavier weight just a little longer, as it's really shown that the Procolours really blend quite well. They look really nice on the page. They were also really easy to create and crossed over each other really well, which is an absolute bonus and a tick from me. In the red and green, pretty much as soon as the green came up into the red, we had a bit of blending happening without me really having to try. The blend is forming like a brown sort of color. And then I found it similar on the blue and yellow. There's literally a green starting to form right at the end of that blue gradient, and it's pretty much carried its way through the whole thing. It's quite a rich, deep green. Again, I've not really had to try to get these pencils to blend. They just did. The Procolour really seems to like mixing with the Procolour. I'd also like to point out here that I haven't had to sharpen my pencils at all for these tests so far, which is excellent for any pencil, let alone a wax-based core one. That's pretty great. For a surprisingly effortless blend and one that feels like it came out of nowhere, I'm giving the Procolour a solid A- for the blending test. Really one of the more effortless blends we've had in a while. Let's see what this white pencil can do. For this test, we're going to use those blending tests that we prepared earlier and bring our white pencil in to lay it over the top of the primary colours. This white has been a bit up and down on these tests, so we really want to see here what effect, if any, the white has when blending with the other colours. How the white pencil changes and lightens the already drawn colours. Will it burnish? Will it blend? Will it do anything at all? Let's go give it a go and see what happens. As I start to lay the white down over the red and green, I am getting a bit of a difference. Because these pencils have already burnished into the paper for much of that gradient, it's really only lightening the colours as I go over. I think it is taking a little bit off the edge here of the blend, but not as much as I think normally it would on any other pencils. What on earth is that? I think I've actually just scratched the paper with my white. Okay, let's look at the blue and the yellow. Very similar results to the other side of the page at the moment. The white hasn't overly helped in our blend, particularly where the green is coming through. In fact, I think because it's lightning that it's almost washed it out. So the white was going really well until it started scratching at our colours. That's easier to do with softer pigment, but that wasn't wood scratching there. That was something in the pigment. I may sometimes get a little bit too enthusiastic with my drawing, but that was just our white pencil being our white pencil. The scratching aside, that white has helped the blending a little bit, and it has added to the burnishing that was already there and increased it for the lighter colours. Primarily though, it's really helped to lighten our colours into a pastel type colour, so that means it's probably a fairly dominant white. Score-wise, the results here show a pretty decent white pencil, which would score pretty high. But with that scratching, it really brings it right down. I mean, what are you going to do with a white that's scratchy? So for sometimes a great, sometimes a scratchy test, I'm going to give our white a C+. I guess it could be intentional, but not sure what that intention is. In this test, we compare the colour the pencil puts down to the colour displayed on the barrel swatch. This test is a simple test, but it's important because we as artists want to know the colour we're grabbing on the barrel is the colour the pencil puts down. For this test, I'm bringing in the pencil barrel and putting it next to the gradient that we created earlier. We're then just going to compare them by eye to see how accurate the colours are. That red pencil is pretty good. The core colour and the colour on the barrel is very similar, particularly at the densest weight. The green is a little bit off. The barrel colour is a bit darker than the green that's been put down here. The blue's not bad. The blue on the pigment has a little bit more pastel and is lighter than the barrel, but it's fairly close. The yellow is similar to the blue. The pigment is lighter and more pastel. The black is again very similar. The pigment on the barrel is darker and richer than the pigment put down. Okay, so not bad overall. I feel like the Procolour have really stepped up their colour accuracy in relation to the Artist or even the Lightfast series. While they are good, they do fall prey to that very common problem many pencils have. The colour on the swatch always tends to be just a little bit more vibrant and a little nicer than what the pigment puts down. I also still have the same issue I have with every Derwent, and that's the swatch on the end really is very small, which makes it hard to see and hard to choose your colours. I know Derwent loves this size, but maybe one day they could release a series with a teeny bit more swatch. Anyway, for a decent but not perfect colour accuracy test, I'm going to give the Derwents a B-. And that puts them here, an improvement, but not perfect. For some weird reason, my favourite test is always the one where I break things. But that's okay because it's all in the name of science. For this test, we work out how much pressure we need to put on these pencils before they break. To me, when you look at the breakpoint in a pencil, it's all about consistency. Does the brand have a consistent mix in their core to get a similar snapping point every single time? I'm very curious what's going to happen here as the Procolour seem very consistent but also really soft and then sometimes really hard. I guess we'll see. To make this test as consistent as possible across all the pencils we're going to review, I've set up a couple of controls. I'm going to sharpen each pencil to a point. I'm then going to dull them slightly by drawing 3 lines at pressure. Basically, this will make sure we don't have a super fine point that will break immediately. I'm then going to be using a 45-degree square to get a consistent angle of pressure. Makes sense? Let's go break some leads. Okay, let's take off that tip of our red and set up our angle. I've been really impressed with how consistent some of these tests have been today, so I'm hoping it crosses over here as well. The weight is on. 500, 6, 7, 8, 9, and snap! 1,029 grams. Quite a respectable weight. Our green, if we set up this test very quickly and start with our weight. 200, 300, 400, 5, 6, 700, 8, 9, 1 kilogram, and snap! 1,040. Very, very close to our red. Onto our blue. Setting ourselves up. The blue has been pretty similar to our red through all of these tests. Hopefully it's the same here. 200, 300, 400, 5, 6, 7, 8, and snap! 997 grams. Slightly softer, but only very slightly. Onto our yellow. Setting it up and the weight is on. 200, 300, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and snap! 1,060 grams. We are very close with all these numbers. Our black is setting up now. This black has been a bit scratchy and a little bit difficult to control at times, so I'm predicting this will be an outlier for our weights. 400, 500, 600, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15! 1,534 grams, much harder than our colors. And our final pencil, the white. Often whites in a kit are softer than the rest of the pencils due to them being used for blending. But let's see here. 500, 6, 7, 800, 9, and snap! 997 grams, exactly the same as our blue. These pencils are very consistent. I'm going to casually use the word excellent here in their consistency. Excluding the black, we were 63 grams difference between all of our colors and our white from highest to lowest, which is very much the best breakpoint result we've had across any pencil yet. I'm not forgetting that black, don't worry, I'm gonna get to that. Our lowest was an equal score of 997 for our blue and our white, whereas our highest score here was 1,534 grams for the black. That gives them an average breakpoint of 1,109 grams, slotting them into our scale here, above last episode's Arteza and below the Faber-Castell Black Edition. By modern pencil standards, that is a very reasonable pencil strength, but they would have been closer to 1 kilogram without that black, which is still pretty good to be fair. Now, this black, I'm gonna make the call here and say that this black is intentional. There is so much about this kit that really feels like the wizards at the factory have planned everything and put a lot of thought into every aspect of how they're made. A black this different must be intentional. Sure, there are some dumb things, that's swatch, but a harder black has a lot of uses, particularly if it's their blackest black. Edging and outlining, just to name a few. So, for today, for our break factor, until proven otherwise, I'm going to give Derwent the benefit of the doubt about this black, eyeballing you here, Derwent, and give the Derwent Procolour an exceptional A. If I was certain that black was intentional, we'd likely have our first ever S. It's time for our final test. Do these pencils spark joy or do they cause despair? This test is very much my personal opinion, which I formed across all of these tests. Do the Derwent Procolour spark joy? Let's try them out with some art while we talk about it. When I decided I'd like to try and do some art in these videos instead of just talking at you for 5 minutes solid, I realized I'd have to make each art piece specific to each episode's pencil. I always start with a bit of an idea as to what I think the pencils can do, but also keep in mind what I can physically do with the color range from each kit. For the Procolour today, I've settled on this little scene here with our mushroom teapot manor and our little frog hero. It's a fairy tale setting in a world just over the next hill. Technically though, it's also something that will need both light and shadow, saturation in some areas, but also subtle tones and a fair bit of blending. Hopefully displaying all of the things that Derwent says these pencils can do. Let's start the joy factor talking about the pencil design. I really do like the look of these pencils. They are just really elegant looking. I'm finding them comfortable in my hand. The size and the texture of the pencil, remember that artist pencil had that weird texture, but the Procolour is really pleasant. They do feel like something you'd find in an upmarket design studio. My problems with the design are very much Derwent problems as a whole. Derwent Silver is not great. The swatch on the end is not big enough, and I'd like more detail in the swatch on the tin. But that's pretty consistent across every Derwent range I see. Derwent, your entire range can be just a little bit better if you fix these. The Procolour colour range is quite good. The 36 kit here is only half of what they offer, but it surprised me how really bright and saturated the colours were. However, I still feel like Derwent really directs their colour schemes towards the more muted end of the spectrum. Sometimes with kits like this, for artists like me, having a specific colour story in a kit can be advantageous. Knowing what it is well really helps tell your story on paper. The Derwent kits always just feel like they take some getting used to. Feel-wise, I'm surprisingly finding the way this pencil runs over the paper at times feels quite dry, which I'd say seems a bit weird for such a saturated wax-based pencil. It's not bad, but again, it does take getting used to. They also seem to have excellent longevity. For the first time in a long while, I'm going to have finished this test with almost an intact pencil kit. Not having to constantly buy new pencils is really a big plus. Speaking of buying the Procolour, it can be cheap or not depending on the kit that you buy. We're looking at 120 Australian or 77 US for the 36 kit. Or if you're cleverer than me and go for the 72 kit, it's only a tiny bit more expensive at 140 Australian, which is $90 US. For a pencil that is lasting as long as these, that's a pretty respectable price point. Test-wise, they have done exceptionally well in some tests and quite poor in others. A lot of things like the gradient test feel like they have sacrificed that mid-range of colour to get such a light and such a heavy end. This feels like what they meant by combining the two ranges of pencils. The Colorsoft is very dense and the artist pencil range is hard and light. I am getting a mid-range, particularly here in my artwork, but it's taking me more than a little bit of effort to get it. I think this is something you'd get used to, and with practice, if you did, feels like these pencils would offer a broader spectrum of vibrancy than many other pencils. But that takes practice, of course. As I'm doing my art here, I'm really becoming impressed with how well these pencils have blended. Mixing and layering have both been so easy. If we look here in our artwork, we're literally able to see that versatility on the page. From the light, subtle tones of the sky, to the saturation and vibrancy of the frog, to the ease in which I was able to shade and lighten. Even the way the black outlines has worked a treat for this artwork. And it's just so easy with the Procolour. These pencils have been remarkably consistent through all of our tests and feels really intentional. Everything about this pencil feels like it's been planned, which is very impressive and very refreshing. So, the big question, do these pencils spark joy? Yes, really they do spark joy. Almost everything about these pencils feels like it's built for a purpose, and I really like that. There is a learning curve to them, but after doing this artwork here, I think I'm finally getting the hang of it, and you know what? I'm really liking them. So, for a pencil that may actually become my new favorite, I'm going to give the Derwent Procolour a big fat A for the joy factor. For a real pleasant experience that gets better the more you use them, they really are an A. We're almost done here, but what we are going to do now is take all of our scores from all of our tests and average them for one big final score. The big score, if you will. So for today, the Derwent Procolour pencils receive a B+. Well done, Derwent. And they slot right in here. Just because we can, and because I'm looking at so many different ranges of pencils that suit everyone, I also like to class our pencils student, hobbyist, or professional based upon how they performed today. These pencils are a bit unusual. Some tests they have done extremely well with, others not so much. I think if you took the time to learn the specific characteristics of these pencils, anyone would enjoy them and get great results from them. But because I think anyone other than a professional artist would have a bit of a learning curve to get the most out of them, particularly in terms of learning how the blending and the gradient works at different pressures, they may not be for everyone. So, with that in mind, I'm going to class them professional. The longer you work with these, the easier they would be to use. Well, that's the end, everyone. Thanks for hanging around with me today. I really hope you've enjoyed checking out the Derwent Procolour pencils, one of the most up and down pencils we've seen in such a long time. What do you think? Do you use them and do you love them? Do you plan on checking them out? Should we start a mailing campaign to make Derwent increase those colour swatches? If you want to grab your own set, I've got some links in the description. Every click helps a tiny bit. Next episode, we are getting back into paints in pen format. I'm checking out the Faber-Castell Black Edition paint pens. Very new, very modern, and like everything in the Black Edition, very cool. But until then, if you want more stuff, have a little look at the links below. We have a very active Discord that you can sign up for. And if you want to come and chat and hang out, I'm on Twitch most days. That's it for now, everybody. Have a brilliant day. I'll talk to you soon.